Today's topic is addressing barriers to implementing panel processes and other PMH initiatives. So don't worry too much if you don't know what PMH initiatives are. I'll do a quick review of what they are, but essentially we're talking about really any change that we're making in the EMR to try to improve clinic processes. Okay, so first a quick introduction. So I am an analyst with the AMA ACT team, and I am the Wolf EMR user group lead. I'm also the network lead. So if you have any questions or want to share anything related to the EMR network as a whole, you can feel free to email me about those. So normally we would have a co-lead for this group as well. So that would be someone from the field. So it could be any of you really. Just to help kind of shape these meetings and make sure that we're talking about things that are relevant to you guys. Here at the AMA, we are a little bit separated from you, so we don't always know what's going on. So it's always helpful to have someone kind of beside me to try to help me out with that. So if anyone's interested, and it could be more than one person, it doesn't have to be time consuming. It can literally be, hey, Sarah Joy, I don't think the next topic will apply. What if we talk about this instead? That's all it could be. You can also be super involved if you really want to be. But yeah, if you're interested, email me. We can start looking at what that might look like. Okay, so here is our agenda for today. So welcome and introductions, we just did that. If anyone's new to the call today, you can type your name and your PCN in the chat and we'll say hi. I did want to start with a quick TELUS update just because our last meeting we had Dean Wheatley from TELUS present. So we were asked by TELUS to not record the meeting. So if you missed the meeting, I just wanted to do a quick recap and talk about next steps and who you can contact if you need further information. I'll do a quick review of what the PMH initiatives are. I know we did that 2 meetings ago, but I just want to make sure that it's clear what we're talking about today. And then we'll do the rest of the meeting will just be about barriers. So I want to hear from you. I'll share some of the things that I've heard, and really we can brainstorm things. And then finally, we'll talk about future meetings and do a quick wrap up. Okay, so TELUS updates. So if you have any questions for TELUS, you would like a demo of CHR, or you have questions about contracts or what the future of TELUS might look like, please email me and I can put you in contact with Dean directly. He might not be able to answer your question directly just because I know his time is limited, but he will do his best to put you in contact with someone that can. So please email me. My email will be at the end of this presentation, so you can use that to get in contact with me. I know that at the end of the meeting, we had a Q&A and we didn't get to all the questions. So I did send those off to him and he hasn't gotten back to me, but I will just poke him again because I know he's dealing with a billion things that might have gotten put to the wayside. So I will touch base with him again and make sure that we get those answered, and then I will share those with you guys. If you have any questions or were not able to attend that session, I am looking to schedule another session with him, hopefully in the fall, maybe even August, we'll see. And so hopefully you can attend that one. If not, you can always, like I said, contact Dean, or you can contact me and we can set something quickly up so I can give you just a quick summary of what was said in that meeting. Any questions before we move on to the next section? Okay, if you do have questions, you can always use the chat, come off mute, you can interrupt me at any time. So perfect. Okay, so let's go over the current PMH initiatives. So I've listed all of them here, the main ones. There may be others that you're working on. I know some of you identified some other ones last time, but these are the main ones that ACT is supporting. So if you're unsure what any of these are, what you can do is go to our website. And when you go to our website, you can go to the patient's medical homepage, and on there, it will actually have all of these, and you can click on each one and get a description of what they are. So I'll quickly do a demo for you just to show you what I mean here. So when you go to our page, if you just go to the main ACT page, you'll end up on this page here. If you click on patient's medical home, you'll come here, and this is the main home page. When you scroll down, you'll see, so here we have our patient's medical home with all of the pillars, right? So we start with engaged leadership, we keep going up all the way to care coordination. If you scroll down, all of those are listed here in these boxes. So if you're curious, well, how can I work on engaged leadership in my clinic or in my PCN? It'll list the different initiatives that we support that have to do with that. So maybe your board chairs need to go through some competency training. We offer that. We also have a physician champion network. So that's if you identify physician champions in your PCN or your clinic, they can become a part of this network and network with other physician champions. And what they discuss really is how do we help other physicians in our PCN or in our zone adopt more initiatives? And then it goes on from there. So if you're curious about what ASAP is or what PACT is, you can go to this page and really just peruse and get a better idea of all of them. I also wanted to point you to, so if you go up here and you go under the capacity for improvement and click on here, so PMH change packages, what we've done is we've created some change packages. And what a change package is it walks clinics through how you actually implement a PMH initiative. So we haven't made them for all of our initiatives. We're working on that. But for example, if you're curious about panel processes, so how can I actually implement panel processes in my clinic or in my PCN? This walks you through all of the steps that you'll want to go through. So what happens is first you'll want to identify patients in your panel. How do you do that? So here are some potentially better practices that you can adopt. And then it says, well, how do you actually measure that you're doing that better practice? And then it'll have tools that will help you work through each of those better practices. So hopefully that helps you out. Kind of gives you a better idea of where to look if you're curious about PMH initiatives. And sorry, I'm just getting a message in the chat here. So just give me 1 second. So that's actually, I got a really good question in the chat. So it's about a wolf sandbox. So that's a good question. So this person is from Sherwood Park PCN looking to use a wolf sandbox. So I know that at the AMA we have a wolf sandbox, but I think that's just reserved for the ACT team. I know that some PCNs have actually worked with TELUS to get a sandbox. So when I worked at the South Calgary PCN, we actually had our own sandbox that we could use. And there are ways that PCNs can share sandboxes. So I don't know if anyone in this group has a sandbox that they could look at sharing with another PCN. Oh, it looks like, thank you, Tracy. PCN Edmonton North has one. Okay, so what I can do is, Tracy, I might put you in contact with this person from Sherwood Park PCN. So actually, yeah, here, Tracy and Megan, I'll put you guys both in touch with this person asking the question, and then maybe you guys can go from there and figure out if you can share, or maybe share how you actually got those sandboxes. So I'll just write down your names. That's great. Thank you. Great question. That's exactly what this group is for, is networking on those things. Okay, so essentially PMH initiatives, all of them will require some sort of EMR improvement or change or something like that. Okay, so what I'm curious about, and this is the wrong title, it shouldn't be called paneling, but what I'm asking is, now, what barriers have you encountered when trying to implement EMR changes in a clinic? This could also be a PCN clinic. So what I'll do is I'll share the whiteboard and just think of any barriers you've had to implementing change. And really, I'm talking about EMR specifically, but this could be any kind of change, right? Because we're just talking about asking people to change in general. Okay, can everyone see the whiteboard? Not hearing anything, so I'm hoping that you can. Perfect. I'm seeing some yeses. Awesome. So just know when you're putting stuff on here, it's completely anonymous. I have no idea who you are, so go ahead, be creative. And you can even think of things that have been a barrier for you to change. Like I know for me, a lot of times when I'm asked to change, I'm like, hold on, what? And there are certain barriers that I have myself, right? Okay, so change of staff and still learning the system. So I'm assuming that's staff turnover, which yes, that can be a big barrier because you're having to retrain them all the time. That's a lot of time. Yeah, still learning the system. It's hard to improve if you're still learning the system. And I feel like it's almost like that's too much change, right? It's almost better to learn the system first and then say, okay, how can we use it well? But you first, yeah, you need to learn it first. Training. So maybe I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I assume it probably has to do with not having sufficient training on the EMR. Seems complicated. Yes, absolutely. So especially Wolf, I find, is quite, it seems complicated and it's kind of an old interface, so it's not always user friendly. So that can definitely be a barrier. So some people can't see the screen here. Let me see. How's that? Okay, awesome. Perfect. Yeah, I'm not sure why it stopped the share. Okay, perfect. Tech support is always annoying. Can't we just keep doing what we are doing? Yeah, I know tech support is not always the best. So one thing that's always that can be helpful is to have one or two people in your clinic who can kind of be like your tech support. So that means that they get to know the EMR really well. So they might go through advanced training. They might be like, you can identify people. There's some really tech savvy people. So if you have those in your clinic, they can be helpful and they can help you have bypass the Wolf tech support and kind of be those for you. And that's kind of what this group is for too, right? If you're unsure about something, you can always type in the discussion board and ask, hey, does anyone know how to do this? Because I'm sure we have some very Wolf savvy people on this call. Oh, and how do you type on the screen? So what you can do is if you go under more, so there should be 3 dots in your control panel, and there should be an option to annotate. So if you click that annotate option, then you should see this like it basically a user menu, and it'll say select, text, draw, stamp, spotlight, etc. If you click on text, you should be able to click on the screen and type. So hopefully that helps you out, Claire. Okay, other barriers, physicians not wanting to change. Yeah, I find physicians, I think the hard part, and someone can chime in if they have another idea, but I think it's just that they're already, their time is so precious, right? So if you're asking them to suddenly change what they're doing, they don't really, it's almost hard. They don't have the capacity to, stop, take a second and say, oh yeah, I could do things differently, because they're tied up with patients all day. They're trying to get their charting done. They're probably working overtime. So when you ask them just to learn one more thing, it can be overwhelming. That's right, Tracy. That's a really good point. Relearning takes more time until it becomes second nature. I know that's a huge barrier for me. I'm used to doing something and I can be quite stubborn and just say, well, no, I'm doing it this way and I'm used to this. It becomes routine. But sometimes, yeah, just taking those extra, whether it's half an hour or an hour, overtime can actually save you tons of time. But it's actually being able to step back and take that time. Okay, and can someone type what Claire has in the chat there? Sorry, Claire, I'll the next time we do this, I'll be sure to go through the instructions a little more. Okay, waiting for the new EMR before engaging in anything, even though many of the initiatives are helpful for prepping for the transition. Yeah, that's a good point. And what I would say to, yeah, and I mean, that is a barrier, and we can talk a little bit more about how to address that one, but I understand, right? It's like, well, so we're going to make all these changes and then we're going to change again to another EMR, and then you're going to have to relearn how to do all of this. And that's understandable. Sometimes that is an okay reason to not engage in something right now, right? Now, I would say if you're changing EMRs in 3 years, yeah, you can probably take 3 years to learn to do things a little bit better. But we'll talk later about how to address some of those barriers. Physician willingness to new processes. Yes, absolutely. Issues of data transfer from one EMR to another. That's a huge one. Yeah, because when you switch, so say you're in one EMR, Wolf, and you're putting everything in the right fields, you're standardizing everything, and suddenly you're switching to another EMR and maybe some of those fields don't transfer properly. So then you're having to re-put things in and you're having to figure out how to re-standardize things. Yeah, absolutely. Docs don't like change. So that seems like a really big one is docs just do not like change. Absolutely. And it doesn't just have to be doctors, right? I mean, most people don't really like change, right? Once they're used to a certain process. Awesome. Thank you guys. Those are some really good ones. So I'm hearing some themes, right? Time is a big one. Change fatigue, absolutely. And I can see that be huge during COVID too, right? Suddenly with COVID, people were forced to change. Even if you didn't want to change, you had to change. So I could see that being a really big one right now. And the thing with change fatigue is sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that people are tired of change. And let's take a break until people can actually absorb change and actually implement the changes. So sometimes barriers can be a sign that we need to slow down and maybe change isn't the right thing right now. Okay, anything else? I'll give you guys just a few more seconds in case someone comes up with anything else. And if I misinterpreted anything that people put on here, feel free to speak up and clarify what you put on. Yeah, I like that, Nancy. That's good wording. Press pause. Exactly. Let's take a deep breath and then we can come back to it. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I can definitely repeat the question. So, Diane, I'm asking what are the biggest barriers that you've come across when you're trying to implement EMR changes in a clinic? Initiative exhaustion, so many new ideas to roll out. Yeah, I know, I hear you. They're like, you saw the list of initiatives on 2 slides ago. It's huge. There's tons out there. So I think one way to address that one is small steps, right? To say, let's not look at the big picture. Like I know for me, if I look at every single thing I want to do, let's say in the next 5 years, that's overwhelming. But if you break it down into small digestible steps, right? Even if it's just, hey, what if we look at just one field in the EMR and just improve one thing about that one field? That can be enough, right? Rather than just saying, oh, let's do this whole initiative all at once, or let's do more than one. That can be quite overwhelming. All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I see a new one here. I had clinics that were motivated and ready to change to MedAccess, but sudden change to CHR and stall of TELUS seemed to be the blue. And yeah, exactly. I know. And Wolf isn't even MedAccess. They're in it's a difficult situation right now because they're already asked to change EMRs, which is a huge change. So sometimes for some clinics, that's all they can handle. And maybe it's okay to not work on initiatives at that point. Like maybe, deal with the change of the EMR. And then once people are comfortable with it, then maybe implement change. Because sometimes when people are change exhausted, it can be, you might not end up with the best kind of change in the end, right? You kind of want people to be enthusiastic about the change and give you their best ideas about them and how to implement the changes. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. That was awesome. Oh, and we keep getting more. Okay, concerns regarding data migration and losing, I assume losing data. Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to standardize a field, how does that field actually transfer to the new EMR? So I know when I was at South Calgary PCN, we had 3 different clinics that were on 3 different instances of an EMR, and we had to merge them all into the same instance. And that's exactly, we had to go through every single field and work with the vendors to say, okay, well, how will this field migrate to this one? And really understand those. And we had to do tests to see, okay, well, let's take a sample chart and see how that goes over and, work out any issues. And most clinics don't have the time to do that. Like, we were lucky, we had a whole EMR team. But that's totally understandable. If you're going to standardize a field, you want to make sure it actually, yes, macros. Yeah, you're right, because macros will not carry over, at least not in my experience. So yeah. Now, the one thing that I can advocate for is, yes, there might be issues with data migrating, but sometimes there's value in adopting certain behaviors, right? Because those behaviors can be translated to another EMR, whether it's saying, hey, we need to make sure that we're standardizing things in the EMR. If people get used to that right away when you're using another EMR, people will be more willing to say, oh yeah, we need to standardize all of these fields. No one seems to have seen a great CHR demo, which would help. Yeah. So I don't know who put that in, but if you want to elaborate on that, I'm just wondering what you mean by not a great CHR demo. So like, have you seen an CHR demo, but it wasn't great? Or are you having a hard time getting a CHR demo? Okay. And I see something in the chat here. Initiative can be helped setting. Sorry, I'm not sure what you're trying to say. Okay, so there's only a YouTube demo for CHR. Yeah, so many, that's actually a really good point. So I know that we had a team at the ACT team who talked to CHR and about our initiatives. And yes, that's one limitation to CHR is they don't really have the fields necessary to do a lot of the PMH initiatives. They didn't really know what the patient's medical home was. So that's something that will need to be worked on with CHR. So you're right, ASAP won't be in there. So there's going to be a lot of work to get that EMR up to date with where the other EMRs are at in terms of PMH initiatives. Yeah, thanks, Diane. So if you do want a demo of CHR, you can email me and I'll put you in contact with Dean, and then you can actually get a live demo from someone there. Yeah, so Tracy, that's a really good point. Change processes can actually help you set up a new EMR. So you're right. Yeah, exactly. So like I was saying with standardizations, if you know what you need to do in a new EMR to make it effective, so whether that's standardization or macros or making sure you have the right smart forms or templates set up, it's much easier to do that at the beginning when you first adopt a new EMR than adopting some not great practices at first and then having to change those practices in the future. So that's, yes, great point, Tracy. Okay, so I called this kind of discussion story time. If you have any stories to tell, I'm wondering about examples when you were either able to overcome barriers or you were unable to overcome barriers. So what are some approaches that worked for you? What are some things that didn't seem to work? And you can either use the chat or it might be easier to come off mute as well. Or maybe even just share some struggles you're having right now with barriers where you're like, I don't know how to overcome this, or Or maybe there's reasons that you're not even addressing barriers. Rhonda, so having a roundtable allowing people to brainstorm for at least 1 hour, it's all the big issues out of the way, and then people can start to hear one another. I love that, Rhonda. That's a great point. So I know that one thing we did when we were trying to get all these 3 separate EMR instances all into one was we would meet with the providers and the managers and the actual MOAs, and we would have them all give us their input, right? To say, well, what would work best? Because you have to have everyone's opinions at the table. You can't just say, well, I'm going to go with what the clinic manager says, because everyone plays a part in the EMR. So I love that, Rhonda, getting people's input. Doctor not wanting to panel maintenance was one barrier I had was able to overcome it by explaining best practice. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah. And what works for different people will vary according to the person's interests, right? So this person, best practice was one way of addressing that, right? Another person, it might be time to say, hey, if you do this, it will actually save you time in the long run. And here's how. And sometimes with the time one, what it sometimes takes is just one example of saying, hey, what if you were to just change this one process slightly? And then that often can get them to buy into to future changes as well. Great examples. So Claire, screening during COVID, patients and physicians struggle to get these areas covered. So do you want to elaborate maybe a little bit more, Claire?
Maybe I misunderstood the question. Sorry, I was just talking about barriers, but was it barriers in general with EMR or sorry?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, it's general. Yes, general barriers with the EMR. Absolutely. I'm just wondering why they might have struggled.
Purely patients don't want to do things. The docs are trying their hardest. Their staff are trying their hardest to let patients know. And so when you're doing screening rates in any EMR on certain areas, they're particularly low. So it's just a barrier, I think, that's all around during COVID. That's really all my thought was on that.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point because it's across the board. Screening is down. So it's a barrier right now to actually doing screening. And I think what's going to happen is suddenly there's going to be such a backlog of patients who haven't been screened that when things open up and patients become more comfortable getting screened, then there's going to be the other barrier of, well, we don't have enough time or capacity to do all of this. So that's a really good one, Claire. Thank you. I'm just going to read the chat here. Yeah, so actually I got a private chat, which is a good, yeah. So this person had a doctor that wanted to learn all of the PMH work themselves. And then when the PCN went in to create a search, somehow it got lost and the EMR specialist couldn't find it again. So then the physician just wasn't interested in having the PCN back in. So sometimes, yeah, it can take just one frustration or one issue and suddenly you've lost interest. And so that can be a tough one to deal with. So it's figuring out, okay, how do I get back in there? And how can I, re-engage this person because they were interested at one point. Yeah. So an interesting one is not wanting to discuss attachment with their patients because it creates a barrier, trying to work on language to facilitate a balanced approach that doesn't cause anxiety. That's a great one, Rhonda. Yeah. So I know that we've created quite a few patient scripts. And if you've ever taken the paneling training, or even the PF training, we work on scripting, right? So whether it's scripting with patients or scripting with physicians, language is a huge one. So, and I love that you brought that up because physicians can often bring things up that we don't think about, right? Because they're the ones who actually see the patients one-on-one. So they might identify barriers with patients that we don't think of. And then we have to get creative to say, okay, well, how can we, change our language? How can we help patients understand why we're doing this and actually get patients to buy into what we're doing as well? Initiating CIIC Par with clinics on Wolf EMRs and lack of information on how data migration will impact CIIC Par. Yeah, Minnie, that's a really good one. So I know we are encouraging Wolf clinics to sign up with CIIC Par, and what we're being told is when you migrate to a new EMR, the CIIC Par connection will automatically be integrated into that new EMR. But you're right, the fields that pull up to Netcare will change, right? Depending on how the fields map in the new EMR. Not all EMRs are actually configured for CIIC Par, so that can also be something. So it does involve rework in terms of the fields that you use that will pull to CIIC Par, how you identify patients that should be on your CPAR panel, those kind of things, yes, will involve rework. In terms of actually applying for CIIC Par, that's all done for you. I have a clinic that still has absolutely outstanding screening rates. Unfortunately, they were not documenting. Oh, that's too bad, Sally. That's amazing. Do you want to share how they actually got those screening rates so high?
Hi, Sarah Joy.
Hi.
So it's Sally. The everybody, I have only visited this clinic twice now, and I have seen every single person working on making sure that the patients are being screened opportunistically that come in. And I've even heard a few phone calls for patients that are only doing phone appointments.
Oh, wow.
So they just haven't stopped through all of this.
That's amazing. And patients are obviously open to it as well.
They seem to be. I don't know very much about this particular clinic because I'm new to Peaks to Prairies. But yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. I can't believe it when I ran them. I was there 2 weeks ago and ran all their numbers. It's absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I wonder if part of that is even the clinic doing work before COVID started. And by doing that work, patients maybe understood the importance of getting screened, right? So maybe that might have helped. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the norm for the patients. They've been doing it for quite a while, it seems, but didn't know that they should be tracking it. They've never had a practice facilitator before, so yeah.
That's fantastic. And yes, thank you, Rhonda. Yes, that's amazing. So yeah, if anyone is interested in learning more, Sally, if you're interested in sharing more about Peaks to Prairies, as you find out more, obviously, feel free to share your email or so people can get in touch with you. Okay, MDs are tired of being the ones to explain importance and purpose for this PMH work. It takes so much time, and patients are suspicious of questions and why they need to tie themselves to one MD. Yeah, frustrating that there has not been better and more targeted public campaigns to support this. Yeah, I agree, Diane. And I know that this was brought up at a previous meeting, and I did bring it up with our team to see if we could get Dr. Hinshaw to talk a little bit more about this. But when I went up to them, we actually don't have much say in what Dr. Hinshaw says. And then we were also questioning how many people still listen to her updates, right? So, but I know that they are working on patient campaigns to get patients to understand the importance, because I think they've done a lot of work to get physicians to understand the importance. But yeah, patients don't always understand that. And actually, Sally, we've had a request, I don't know if you'll be open to it, about presenting the clinic's screening process at a future meeting. So that could even be the clinic. If you want me to help facilitate that with the clinic, that would be awesome. Thanks, Sally. So I'll be in touch with you after this, and then maybe we can get that going. Yeah. That's perfect, because our next meeting was about panel processes anyways, so screening kind of ties into that. More information in additional languages would help this perhaps, but requests have not been answered and we have so many languages. Yeah, so that's a good point, Diane. And I know we've done things in different languages for certain initiatives. So I know CIIC Par, we have posters you can put up in different languages. So, and I know that we've had, for example, we had a downtown physician in Calgary who had a lot of Vietnamese speaking patients. So he changed all of he had scripts for his MOAs to use with those patients. And he also had certain forms that were translated into Vietnamese. So it almost seems like that's been on a physician by physician or clinic by clinic basis that people have identified, hey, I have a lot of people who speak this. I know Wetaskiwin and PCN also did some of this work. So yeah, that's a really good point. And those kind of things, those are things that we can bring up in this setting, right? Because if other people are having the same problem, then we can advocate for those resources, right? Whether that's us working on them together or the ACT team working on them or Alberta Health or whoever it might be. So those are great things to bring up even through the discussion board or through these meetings. Yeah, so maybe that's something we can chat about more. Yeah, even if Manita and Diane, if you guys want to connect and talk about how maybe we can do a user group on this, or if you guys just want to take this on, that would be awesome. And thanks, Sally, for sharing your emails there. So if anyone has questions for Sally specific to the clinic, you can use those. Okay, awesome. Those are, I love the participation. You guys are awesome. So just to capture some of what we talked about, let's use the whiteboard again. Okay, so let's share the whiteboard. And so I just want you to quickly type your top tips for overcoming barriers. So we've talked a lot about the barriers that we have, but how can we help overcome these? Listen to concerns. I love that. I know I saw a TikTok recently that talked about how empathy is one of the most important characteristics you can have when you're trying to lead change. So that's a great one. Ask questions. Yes, so that's definitely tied with listening to concerns, right? Ask people what's going on. Yeah, and you can't address barriers unless you know what they are, right? And know why people are maybe afraid of change. Communication and listen. Yes, absolutely. Talk about benefits, brainstorm with other staff. Yeah, because there are tons of benefits to implementing change, but it's finding those benefits that will actually speak to people to say, oh yeah, I do need to make that change. Ask them why to get to the root of the issue. Yeah, so that's a good point. By asking questions, we can get to the root of the problem, right? Maybe what they say initially is a barrier is maybe not what's truly going on. Clarify rumors. That's a big one. Yeah, because people tend to talk and then things get misconstrued, right? So if you can help clarify things for people or maybe address misconceptions, that can be really helpful. Learn from colleagues that have had success addressing the same challenges. Yeah, that's a great one. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here, right? And as we get into more specific initiatives, we can talk about the barriers specific to those and even get you guys networking outside of these meetings. So touching on what's already mentioned, have more public information available about PCN and PMH and why clinics want to work to help support patients in finding their best medical home and why screening is important. I think that's a huge one. I totally agree. And I'll bring that up again with our team, just that patients need to know why we're doing this, right? Because that's a huge barrier. Yeah. Ask everyone for input because you don't know all the barriers. Yeah, don't go in assuming you know all the barriers. Sometimes there's new ones that pop up. Yeah, don't assume you know things. Make it fun, find a way. I love that. So whether it's saying, hey guys, if we get to, like, yeah, and part of that comes in with tracking progress. People like to see that they're making progress on something and then be rewarded for that. So yeah, say, people get to, even if it's just 50% of patients screened, say once we get to that point, we're gonna have a pizza party or whatever it might be. Find what would be rewarding for the clinic. Yeah. And yes, include everyone. I love that. Everyone's involved. It's not about just the physicians. It's not about just the MOAs. It's about the team, right, as a whole. Find their currency and tie everything back to it. Yes. So what's important to them? Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm seeing a ton of listening. Bring food. I love that. Yes, bring snacks, bring candies, whatever it is. It can be something simple, but yes, everyone loves that. Baby steps. I like that too. Um, I've been seeing a lot of diagrams in that where it's this huge staircase, and someone's kind of near the top and they're like, oh my God, I have so far to go, but they've been taking so many baby steps along the way that they're actually pretty far up the staircase. So those can build up pretty quickly. Get back to your clinics quickly, show them they are important by your actions. I love that. Yeah. So clinics want you to be there with them, right? Change is already hard to implement. So if you're right there beside them and you're showing I'm listening, I'm there for you, yeah, they're much more likely to buy in. And Tracy brought in donuts for the staff. Yeah, that's awesome, Tracy. Absolutely. Or yeah, I love that. No, it's okay that you may not know everything about that EMR for that clinic and how you can help each other out in making life easier for all staff involved. And yes, food is a great motivator. So that's a good point. You will probably not know everything about the EMR, but that's okay. It's not about knowing everything about the EMR. It's like you guys said, it's about listening. How do they use the EMR? And you might not be able to answer all of their questions right there and then, but it's okay to say, okay, I've heard all of your concerns. Let me go and take those back and I'll get back to you with how we can take things from here, right? And go back and really think about what they said, absorb what they said, and maybe ask people, say, I'm not sure how to approach this. How do I do this? And like someone said, get back to them quickly to say, hey, yeah, you are important to me. Like someone said, absolutely. Brainstorm with other staff. I love that. Yes, brainstorming is a great tool to find new ideas because every clinic's different. What you use with one clinic might not work for another one. Let's see, share success stories. Yes, that's a really good one. So I think as we'll talk about specific initiatives, we can hear from Sally, for example, in her clinic. How did they do so well? It's always encouraging, right? When you can find out what other people are doing well. And even just for the people sharing their success story, that's hugely rewarding, right? To say, hey, we can help you. We know we got it worked out. Just because something didn't work in the past doesn't mean it won't work today. Take the time to explore all options. Absolutely. So you can have a whole bunch of tools in your toolbox, and sometimes the hammer is appropriate, sometimes the screwdriver. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Diane, I can't move these. I don't know how to do that. Or actually, here, let me see. Oh, I can. There we go. Yes. Just so we can read them a little bit better. Okay, perfect. Okay, what else? Keep updating uptake in the province. Some of them don't want to be left behind, but are waiting to see if this work will stick. Yeah, so we did that with paneling. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but we had like, this is what the progress is across or in each PCN. And they didn't identify the PCNs, they just overall said, this is where you're at, and you could see where you were. And I think you're totally right. Like we see that CIIC Par does the same thing, but we're not really doing it with all of the initiatives. So it is nice to know, hey, yeah, there are others around me who are doing this work and it's benefiting them. And we as a province are investing in this initiative. So yes, absolutely. Because it is difficult to buy into a new initiative right away, right? If you don't know that much about it. And I like the stamps. Thank you. Yes, if you agree with someone's comment, absolutely put a heart or check mark. Keep asking questions, watch and observe processes. That's a really good one. Yeah, so there's someone at the ACT team who has a story. And so she was in a clinic and she just sat there and observed for a couple hours just how the staff worked. And one thing she noticed was they had one stapler, and they had the stapler at the front of or where the reception was. And then throughout the day, people would come. So whether it was someone in the back office was like, hey, I need the stapler, or an MOA across the room was like, hey, I need the stapler. And this went on all day. And so finally she said, hey, have you thought about buying more staplers? And I mean, staplers are cheap. It's a cheap solution. They were like, no, we've never thought about that. And that was a huge thing for them. right? Like even just that little change, they were like, oh, I don't have to go and ask for the stapler every time I need it. So yeah, sometimes you can pick up on things that maybe the clinic might not pick up on. Yes. Okay, what else? And celebrate small victories. Yes, absolutely. That's a really good one. It's all about those small wins, right? So if you can figure out what the small wins are for the clinic, so maybe the clinic's been frustrated with something for so long and it's something that would be easy to fix. Those are huge in helping clinics adopt change. So if you can just find those quick wins, we call them, those are really helpful. So I'm hoping that use like plain language to explain. Absolutely. Sometimes we end up with a lot of jargon, right? If we've been doing something for a long time. So if you can explain things in a way that's understandable for everyone, then that's helpful. Or even just creating a space where people feel comfortable to ask questions, right? Say, hey, and I think one of the ways to do that is to show that you don't know everything either, right? So if you start asking questions, it can build that environment so other people are comfortable asking questions as well. Then that can be a good way of explaining. Okay, so I'm hoping I got all of them. And I'll just, sorry, I'm just gonna make sure that we can see all of these. Okay, perfect. And actually, I really love the food one because I think that's some of the most successful meetings I've seen have food involved. So, okay. Okay, awesome. So what I'll do is I'll actually, I'll share those whiteboards on the Wolf resources page. And so you guys can refer back to them and see what other people have said. Okay, awesome. So now I just want to quickly talk about how we can help each other moving forward, because these meetings are great, but I know you're going to come up with questions and things in between meetings. And so what do you do when that happens and you want to get back to a clinic quickly and you're not really sure how to respond? So I'll start. I'll give you some of the ideas that I came up with, but then I want you guys to share as well what else might work. So we have our discussion boards, right? So we have our main discussion board, we have our individual EMR discussion boards. So use those. Go and ask questions, and something that you think might be a dumb question might actually be something that a lot of other people are struggling with. And networking. So like I said, if you're interested in chatting with someone else from the group, so say they said something in the chat and you're like, I want to learn more about that, feel free to email me and I can try to connect you with them so you can learn more. And then user group meetings. So these are great places to bring things up. So I love that someone brought something up about a Wolf sandbox, because now, I can connect you to people who might be able to help. So yeah, feel free to interrupt me anytime. I know we have topics, but if you have any questions during these, go ahead and ask them. And then if you're interested in a certain topic at a future meeting, let me know, because then I can kind of pull the group and say, hey, would this be useful? And we can use these meetings to help brainstorm some solutions. Any other ideas of ways that we can help each other out? Thanks, Sally. Yeah, why don't I'll connect with you outside of this meeting and we'll chat a little bit more to see what we might be able to do. And those are awesome experiences to have. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Sarah Joy, Sally. That was actually for Claire, but I kept flipping everything back. But of course, the option is open to everybody. I'm just juggling a couple of different contracts right now, so my time is a little bit limited, but certainly I can step in wherever.
Awesome. Thank you, Sally. And if anyone else on this call says, hey, I might be able to help too, that would be great. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you can, if you come up with barriers or anything like that, how this group can help you address them. So what I'll do is I'll share my email at the end of this presentation. So if there's anything, if you're like, hey, I don't remember who said this in the meeting, but I really want to connect with them, or whatever it might be, just shoot me an email and I'll try to help you out. Okay, so future meetings. So I am looking for some volunteers. The next meeting that I would like to do is on panel processes, and we'll tie screening into that as well if we can. So I know, Sally, you've had some experiences, so it doesn't even have to be you presenting, but if you get to know that clinic a little bit better and someone from there feels comfortable presenting, then that would be awesome. But if anyone else has stories to share about how a clinic has successfully implemented panel processes or any unique solutions to barriers, those kinds of things, email me, and you don't even have to share it yourself. I can share it for you. But yeah, just looking for some examples for our next meeting. And then speaking of our next meeting, I'm wondering how many of you would like to take a break for the next 2 months, just because I know it's summer. So I'm hoping many of you take summer vacations. And I'm wondering how many would be open to starting up in the fall in September again. So just taking a couple months off. So thank you. So yeah, if you're open to that, just perfect. Awesome. Because I'm hoping that by that time, COVID has had some time to kind of settle down, and maybe clinics will be at a better place to look at changes in that. So perfect. I'll look at a time in September. I know we've had a lot of meetings recently too, so that'll give you guys a nice little break. Okay, perfect. So yes, I'll schedule that meeting in September. And if you have any questions or anything, my email is on the slide here. I'll also type it in the chat here. So you can feel free to use that. Yeah, Diane, I hope a lot of the physicians get to take some time off. They definitely deserve it. So thank you, Rhonda. And I hope you have an amazing summer too. And hopefully everyone can take a little bit of a break and breathe. And I know it's been a stressful year, so. Awesome. I'm glad you found it helpful, Claire. And thank you, everyone. You were so participative today. It was so nice. So I truly love these meetings and everyone sharing. And yeah, I hope you have a great summer. If you don't have access to the discussion boards, make sure you email networks@albertadoctors.org. And Leanne on our team will hook you up with those. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And we'll see you in September.